There comes a time when your soul gets tired, not because you're weak, but because you've been pouring into someone who is never pouring back. You've been giving your time, your heart, your attention, your energy. And in return, you've received inconsistency, confusion, and emotional crumbs. And I want you to hear this clearly. What you constantly feed will continue to grow, even if it's hurting you. You've been the one keeping the connection alive. You've been showing up even when you weren't being met with the same energy. And deep down, you've known something's off. But here's the truth. The moment you stop feeding what isn't feeding you, the game changes. The moment you take your energy back, your power returns. It's not about revenge. It's not about silence as a strategy. It's about freedom, about saying no more and meaning it. Energy is currency. You invest it every single time you text first, worry late at night, or try to fix what you didn't break. But what if you stopped? What if you stopped showing up for someone who only notices your worth when your energy is gone? That's the shift. That's the power of pulling back. When your energy is no longer available, it creates tension. That tension creates awareness, and awareness, that's what changes everything. When you stop giving energy to confusion, you create clarity. When you stop chasing answers from someone who avoids accountability, you finally start getting answers from within. And when you stop making someone else your emotional center, you return to your own gravity. That's when he starts to notice. That's when he starts to feel the emptiness you used to fill. That's when your absence speaks louder than your words ever could. And let's be honest, if your presence didn't move him, your absence will. But this speech isn't about what he does. It's about what you do when you stop bleeding energy into dead ends. Because when you finally cut off the energy supply to what drains you, everything that is meant for you begins to flow. You stop chasing, and you start attracting. You stop proving, and you start embodying. That is the moment the dynamic shifts. That is the moment he comes back. Not because you convinced him, but because you finally chose you. Energy is your most sacred form of currency. Every word you speak, every thought you dwell on, every moment you spend emotionally invested in someone who isn't reciprocating, that's energy being spent. And just like money, when you keep investing into something that gives you no return, eventually you go bankrupt. But emotional bankruptcy doesn't look like an empty wallet. It looks like sleepless nights, drained confidence, anxiety that builds quietly in the background. It looks like you second, guessing yourself, questioning your worth, wondering why you're not enough for someone who was never meant to carry your heart in the first place. The truth is, you don't even realize how much energy you're giving away until you stop. You don't notice the slow leak until you step away from the cycle. You don't feel the heaviness until you finally put the weight down. Every time you overanalyze a text, replay a conversation, or adjust your behavior to hold someone's attention, you're spending energy. And the painful part, most of that energy is going towards someone who's not even aware of the cost you're paying. They don't feel the investment. You do. They aren't drained. You are. And the longer you stay in that loop, the more disconnected you become from your own inner power. But when you make the decision to pull your energy back, to stop calling, stop texting, stop wondering, you do something radical. You stop feeding a dynamic that's been feeding off of you. That's not revenge. That's not a tactic. That's wisdom. That's awareness. You start treating your energy like it's valuable because it is. You stop offering it to people who haven't shown the emotional maturity to hold it with care. You stop throwing light into black holes hoping it will change something. You finally recognize that you're not meant to fix, you're meant to feel fulfilled. And if someone's presence is costing you your peace, your clarity, your energy, then it's too expensive. Energy is what creates your entire reality. Where your energy flows, your attention goes. And when your energy is constantly flowing towards someone who doesn't match it, you're not just losing time, you're losing alignment. You're being pulled away from your goals, your purpose, your emotional health. But the moment you pull your energy back, the world begins to shift. You start thinking clearly. You start moving differently. You get your power back. And ironically, it's in that exact moment, when you stop chasing, when you stop trying, that they start to feel your absence, not because you forced anything, but because the source of energy they once relied on has disappeared. You're no longer their emotional anchor, and that absence, that's where realization begins. You didn't have to beg, you didn't have to scream, you just stopped giving, and suddenly your value became undeniable. When you give someone consistent access to your energy, your love, your attention, your emotional presence, they begin to see it as a normal part of their life, not because they're unkind, but because humans adapt quickly to what is always there. Your texts become routine, your check-ins expected, your emotional availability a given. Over time, your presence fades into the background like white noise. But when something becomes predictable, it also becomes invisible. That's the paradox, the very thing you offer so freely, the emotional space you hold, the comfort of your care, begins to lose its weight because it's always available. But the moment you stop, the moment you pull your energy back without fanfare, without bitterness, just with stillness, that's when everything shifts. What was once expected is now missing. The warmth that filled their day, the comfort of knowing you were just a message away. It's no longer guaranteed, and that shift creates friction. That friction turns into awareness. They feel the void, and for the first time, they're forced to confront how much space you truly occupied in their world. It's not just the absence of your presence, it's the absence of what your presence gave. You see, when someone never has to earn your energy, they begin to assume they're entitled to it. But the moment you remove that constant supply, they're left in silence. And in that silence, they begin to reflect. They begin to notice how your laughter used to light up a moment, how your support used to carry them through their mess, how your consistency made them feel safe. Even if they never admitted it, that's the beauty of pulling back. You stop convincing them of your worth, and you start letting the contrast do the work. Your absence becomes the wake-up call your words never could. The effort they didn't appreciate now echoes in its absence. They begin to feel what they never paid attention to. They begin to value what was once dismissed. And you finally get to see that you never needed to give so much for someone to recognize your worth. You just needed to stop giving to the wrong dynamic. Your stillness becomes your statement. Your silence becomes your strength. So yes, your presence may have once been overlooked, but your absence, the energy you took away, will be unforgettable. Not because you made it a performance, but because you made a decision to stop giving energy to someone who never truly valued it until it was gone. That's not manipulation. That's self-respect. And when pulling back isn't about playing games, it's about restoring balance. When you've been the one constantly initiating, explaining, forgiving, and showing up while someone else simply receives without reciprocating, the dynamic becomes emotionally lopsided. You're doing all the heavy lifting, often without even realizing it. You keep the connection alive by giving, fixing, managing. But when that energy isn't met with equal effort, it starts to wear you down. You begin to feel resentful, depleted, and disconnected from yourself. And that's when the shift must happen, not out of anger, but out of alignment with your own value. Choosing to stop giving energy is not about withholding love, it's about refusing to overextend. It's about acknowledging that a connection is only real if it flows both ways. When you pull back, you're not closing your heart. You're closing the tap that's been left open, pouring into someone who hasn't stepped up. And that's the turning point. It's when you stop trying to make them understand and start making yourself the priority. You stop explaining your worth and begin embodying it. That kind of quiet confidence is powerful. And yes, it's deeply felt. Most people don't realize they're being carried until the person doing the carrying steps away. That's why pulling back hits different. It interrupts the emotional autopilot. The comfort they felt in knowing you were always there is gone, and in its place is uncertainty, questions, regret. But you didn't have to create that through manipulation. You created it through boundaries. You said, "This is as far as I go without mutual effort," and in doing that, you give the other person an opportunity, either rise to meet you or fall away, but you're no longer chasing clarity. You've already chosen peace. This isn't coldness, it's emotional maturity. It's knowing that continuing to give to someone who only takes is an act of self-abandonment, and you've done enough of that. Pulling back is the moment you say, "I love myself more than I fear losing this." And in that declaration, your energy shifts from need to power. You become emotionally grounded. You become magnetic, not because you're chasing, but because you're aligned. That energy is rare and it's unforgettable. So when you stop giving, it's not about revenge. It's about release. It's about stepping out of a one-sided pattern and reclaiming the emotional space you gave away too freely. And the ripple effect of that decision is huge. They feel it, they notice it, they miss it, but most importantly, you feel it. You feel your strength returning, you feel your clarity rising, and you realize pulling back wasn't the end of the connection, it was the beginning of your real power. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop overcaring to the point where it drains you. When you detach, you're not building walls, you're creating boundaries, you're not becoming cold, you're becoming clear. You're saying, I see this for what it is, not what I want it to be. And in that clarity, you stop giving your energy to confusion, false hope, and emotional chaos. You stop chasing explanations. You stop trying to decode someone who can't even communicate their own truth. Instead, you return to yourself, and that is where the shift happens. Pulling back your energy allows you to step into observation mode. You no longer react to breadcrumbs. You stop getting pulled into cycles of temporary highs and emotional lows. You start seeing patterns for what they are, not making excuses for them. When you detach, you reclaim your emotional power, not to punish anyone, but to protect your peace. You begin to realize how much of your identity had been wrapped around the connection and how that attachment was costing you your center. Emotional detachment helps you get grounded again. It gives you back your time, your mental space, your freedom. And what's so powerful is that, in your detachment, they start to feel the difference. Suddenly, the energy they used to rely on is no longer available. The emotional safety net they used to fall into is gone. And what once seemed so stable, your attention, your loyalty, your availability, is no longer guaranteed. They can't predict you anymore, and that unpredictability forces them to confront their own behavior. Your detachment shines a light on everything they took for granted. They feel the distance, and they feel it deeply, but the most important transformation happens inside you. You start feeling lighter, clearer, stronger. You stop obsessing over what they're thinking and start paying attention to what you're feeling. Your worth no longer depends on how someone else treats you. You stop needing closure because you realize you are the closure. Detachment allows you to step back and see the whole picture. And when you see it clearly, you can finally stop investing in potential and start living in reality. This kind of emotional detachment doesn't push the right people away. It pushes the wrong energy out of your life. And ironically, it's often the very thing that brings someone back. Not because you chased, but because you stopped. Not because you withdrew in anger, but because you reconnected to your truth. You no longer need to control the outcome. You've done the most powerful thing anyone can do. You've taken your energy back, and now it works for you. When you stop giving energy to someone who didn't appreciate it, something powerful happens. You become magnetic. And that magnetism doesn't come from trying harder, reaching out, or proving your worth. It comes from your silence, your calm, your grounded energy that says, I am whole, with or without you. That is the kind of energy people feel even from miles away. When you're no longer reacting, no longer emotionally chasing, no longer seeking validation, the dynamic shifts instantly. Suddenly, the one who is used to your emotional availability starts to wonder where you've gone. Not physically, but energetically, the warmth, the softness, the steady attention. They're gone, and that absence, it echoes. There is something deeply attractive about someone who no longer seeks approval. Someone who is no longer easily moved by someone else's inconsistency. When you become that person, still, centered, and confident in your silence, you create a new type of presence. You become a question in their mind instead of the answer that was always readily available. They start to wonder what changed, why the pattern broke, why your energy feels different, and that curiosity, that's where awareness begins, because now they don't have you in the way they used to. Now, your attention isn't guaranteed. Now they have to earn it. That's the power of energetic withdrawal. It makes people take notice. It makes them reflect. And more often than not, it draws them back. Not because you said anything, but because your absence spoke for you. You stopped showing up to the same emotional conversation and in doing so forced them to have a new one with themselves. Suddenly, they're not just missing the relationship, they're missing the version of themselves they were when they were connected to your energy. And that version, elevated by your presence, is what they crave again. But here's the truth. While they're sitting in reflection, you're rising. You're becoming more focused, more self-aware, more emotionally aligned. Your energy is no longer scattered, it's sacred, and that sacredness makes you even more powerful. You no longer seek, they now sense. You no longer chase. They begin to feel pulled toward you because nothing is more magnetic than a person who has remembered their worth and stopped overgiving. Your power no longer flows outward trying to be seen, it radiates inward, becoming impossible to ignore, and when they do come back, as they often do, they come back to a version of you that's no longer waiting, no longer available in the same way. And that's not because you're playing hard to get. It's because you finally understood that your energy is your legacy. It's the fingerprint you leave on every interaction. And once you stopped giving it away freely, you became unforgettable, not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped trying. Reclaiming your energy isn't just about removing it from someone else, it's about returning it to yourself. It's about standing still long enough to hear your own voice again. After all the reaching, all the emotional labor, all the hoping, there's a moment when you finally realize, I've been giving everything and losing myself in the process. And that realization doesn't come in a dramatic explosion. It comes in quiet awareness. It comes when you're exhausted from caring more than the other person, when you're tired of explaining things they should already understand. When you're done pretending their bare minimum is enough, that's when you stop, that's when you turn inward, that's when the healing begins. The moment you stop giving energy to someone who couldn't hold it, you create space for you. Space to breathe, space to feel. Space to rebuild the parts of you that were slowly being chipped away every time you tolerated less than you deserved. Because the truth is, giving too much to the wrong dynamic trains your nervous system to survive on chaos. But when you pull back, your nervous system starts to recalibrate. You stop feeling anxious when they don't text. You stop waiting for the next emotional high or low. You stop needing external confirmation to feel worthy. You begin to come home to yourself. Healing doesn't happen in the noise. It happens in the space, and pulling back gives you that space. It allows you to grieve what you were giving away. It gives you the power to recognize how much energy you spent trying to fix something that wasn't yours to fix. It frees you from the pattern of tying your self-worth to someone else's behavior, and in that freedom, your clarity sharpens. You stop romanticizing their potential and start seeing reality. You stop editing yourself to be enough for someone who never saw your full value. And that level of self-awareness, that's where true strength lives, and ironically, that strength becomes undeniable. You stop speaking your pain and start embodying your power. You start making decisions that align with your peace, not your fears. You begin to shine in ways that can't be ignored, and that's when they feel it. That's when they notice the shift. That's when they realize the gravity of what they lost, because while you were healing, they were coasting on borrowed energy, yours. And now that it's gone, the emptiness is impossible to avoid. But this time, your silence isn't a cry for help, it's a statement of truth. A truth that says, I will never abandon myself again. So the healing doesn't just benefit you, it transforms you. It lifts you into a version of yourself that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't explain, a version of you that commands respect by the way she treats herself, and in that energy, everything changes. Not because you forced it, but because you finally remembered who you are. You didn't lose them. You found you, and that, above all else, is the greatest return on any energy you'll ever reclaim. There comes a moment in your life where you don't just get tired. You wake up. You stop waiting for someone to see you to change to match your energy. You stop asking, what more can I give? And you start asking, what am I sacrificing just to be seen? That's the moment of real transformation. That's when the old version of you, the one who over-explained, overextended, overloved, starts to fade, and in her place a woman of strength begins to rise, not bitter, not angry, just clear on her value. Clear on her energy, clear on what she will no longer tolerate. When you stop giving energy to someone who didn't truly value it, everything begins to shift. You no longer beg for attention, time, or respect. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's inconsistency. You stop offering your energy like a gift to someone who treats it like a convenience. And in that stillness, in that pause, in that quiet decision to pull back, you become unforgettable. Not because you forced someone to miss you, but because you finally stopped forcing everything. Ironically, the very moment you detach is when they start to notice. The space you created by pulling back becomes undeniable. The comfort they once had in your presence turns into discomfort in your absence, and while they're just beginning to realize your worth, you've already returned home to yourself, you've already begun healing. You've already risen. You're no longer who you were when you begged for clarity. You're someone who embodies clarity. That's the version of you they remember. That's the energy that echoes after you've stopped speaking. But here's what matters most. This wasn't about getting them back. It was about getting you back. The energy you poured into someone else is now being poured into your dreams, your boundaries, your peace. That shift in focus is not just self-love, it's self-respect. It's how you teach the world to treat you, because when you protect your energy, you protect your destiny, and when you finally stop trying to fix what was never aligned, you make room for everything that is. So if you've pulled back, if you've chosen yourself, if you've gone quiet, not to manipulate but to heal, stand proud in that silence, let it speak for you. Let it be the loudest, clearest, most powerful message you've ever sent. Because in that silence, in that sacred stillness, you didn't lose anything. You gained everything. You gained freedom. You gained self-worth. And most importantly, you gained a version of yourself that no longer gives energy away lightly. That woman, she doesn't chase. She doesn't beg. She attracts, and what's meant for her will come. Not because she demanded it, but because she finally stopped giving energy to what wasn't. Thank you for being here with me today. If you've made it to this point, I want to honor you, not just for listening, but for feeling, for allowing these words to meet you where you are, and for being honest enough with yourself to say, I'm ready to stop giving my energy to what drains me. I know it's not easy to pull back. It's not easy to choose yourself after giving so much to someone who didn't fully receive it. But I want you to know this. Your energy is sacred, your love is powerful, and your presence matters. Just because someone didn't see it before doesn't mean it wasn't there. You are not forgotten, you are not invisible, you are simply remembering who you were before you overgave. Every time you choose peace over chaos, stillness over chasing, and self-respect over desperation, you are healing. You are stepping into your highest self, and that version of you, she is strong, centered, magnetic, and unshakable. Don't ever let anyone or anything convince you to give that power away again. So thank you for trusting this message, for holding space for your own growth, and for beginning to rewrite your story. You are not alone on this journey, and everything you're letting go of is making space for what's truly meant for you. Until next time, walk in your truth, protect your energy, and never forget, the moment you stop giving it to the wrong place, everything right begins to flow in. Thank you and goodbye for now.